All right, welcome to Staking Mondays. My name is Alan. I'm the head of research at Staking Rewards, and today it's my pleasure to discuss the state of staking with Elton, one of our recent senior researchers to join the team here at Staking Rewards. Together with Elton, we'll be discussing, going through a few slides later on in a few minutes, going through all the data we've collected in the past few months on user behavior, provider behavior, and some discussions around why we think these numbers are there the way they are. Elton, quick intro from yourself.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Excited to be chatting with you today and joining the Staking Rewards team. Background on myself, I've been working in venture capital, the tech space, and finance for the past 6 years. So looking forward to digging into this data with you guys. We've got about 1,500 users that responded and about 30 validators as well. So it's really exciting information.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, so just to give an overview, so Elton's going to be running our content team. He's done a great job the past few months, and the full report's going to come out before the end of the year, hopefully. There's been a lot of things going on in the market, so we need to see whether timing-wise we can fit everything in before then. But yeah, let's jump straight into the presentation then.
Let's do it. Okay, there we go. So as we mentioned, 1,500 crypto users responded with the survey. There's about 30 questions that they went through. And then the validators, 30 validators, some of the logos on here, they went through about 40 questions. So we consolidated all the responses. And for this particular presentation, it doesn't include all the responses, so it's not the most exhaustive, but it highlights what we think is some of the most interesting aspects of it. So we've divided this particular presentation into 4 sections. So first we'll talk about what users assess when they're looking at tokens that they're investing in, validators that they're selecting to stake with, and how they go about making those decisions. Then we'll look into the transition towards non-custodial staking and what are some roadblocks that exist to that today from a user perspective. The key development section will go through liquid staking and MEV as 2 of the more exciting advances this year within crypto. And then lastly, we'll finish off with the validator outlook. And throughout it, Alan and I will be chatting about the data, and then we'll also be giving some thoughts on how we think the data got there, as Alan mentioned. So kick things off on the first section regarding the user staking assessment factors. This particular slide consists of 4 different questions that we asked. So the first one, and Alan, let me know your thoughts on this one. We can go one by one. So out of all the responses, about 56% of users mentioned that the long-term asset outlook and the rewards, which is about 31% of users, are the 2 most important factors when deciding which token to invest in. I was a little bit surprised on this one because I noticed, like, for example, team and the actual usability of the protocols that people are investing in wasn't as highly ranked. But wondering what your thoughts are on this one, Alan.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general within crypto, you see that a lot of people not really caring so much about who you are and what you do. So I think that's why the team, like, is probably quite a bit less important. I think maybe it was phrased in a way where people think, oh, the team is from the US and from Germany. Like, maybe that's not what they care about. Maybe it's more of the output or the future vision that kind of takes over there. So the long-term view of the asset might also incorporate what people feel about the team in the future and how they're growing, rather than the team itself. And yeah, I mean, like, obviously we are staking rewards. People want to stake for long term. So I'd say long-term view is quite important for people. I guess most people that come to our site do want to do something for long term. Same with the rewards incentives. That's why we come to staking rewards. And yeah, I mean, see value in using the protocol. It is a bit surprising, but at the same time, we are still fairly early, in my opinion, on all the utility that we'll be seeing going forward on all the layer 1s, layer 2s. Yeah, even on the protocol level, the people who are looking for the utility, let's say if you want to get involved with GMX or GOP, like that's still a very small part of our users, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. It's interesting, like in traditional venture world, you see some of these stats flip, like the idea of team being super important. But in, looking at like the crypto space and that world going forward, it's definitely more about what you deliver and what the vision is like, versus information that people might not know as much about, like the team and so forth. All right, so we'll move to the next question, the staking hesitations. So we asked users, why do they think, not necessarily themselves, but why do they think that people are hesitant to stake? So biggest one, 61% of respondents mentioned that people lack the knowledge of staking. And second came in the regulation and tax uncertainty. And I think these ones were pretty straightforward, and I mean, no surprises here on my end. Any thoughts on this one?
No, not really. I mean, lack of knowledge, that's what, we discussed at the summit with a lot of the attendees and during Breakpoint. It's definitely the lack, people lack this knowledge and understanding, and how, like, the UX of the whole design is just, still in its infancy. We'll be discussing the, users' preference to, staking or being involved in centralized exchanges on the next slide, I think, of the slide after. But you can see a huge difference between UX using centralized exchanges versus having to use multiple wallets, different applications just to delegate to a validator on chain. So I think that's, I'm actually surprised it's only 61%, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely something that requires still a lot of work for like the average user. Next, we have the validator selection. So this particular question covers, from the user perspective, like what data points do they look at when they're trying to assess the validator that they're looking to stake with? The most important one, and again, I think this one makes a lot of sense, is about features. So what are the different tokens that the validator supports? The more options, the better. What type of customer support do they offer? And then what type of terms do they offer the user? So things like commission rates, and lockup periods and things like that. And then next one, surprising, this one, like team is more important than when we were looking at token selection, security third, and so on. I think these ones are probably straightforward as well. And the last one on the validators, the question that we asked for this particular presentation was if the high balance stake is a particularly high ratio. So that means that of all the balance that the validator has, users really want to see the majority of that being staked, and about 50% of users found that important. Which again, that one's a little interesting because I'm not too sure what to make of that particular data point. Any thoughts on that, Alan?
Yeah, I guess if you can take this question from two sides. So maybe some users look at it from two different perspectives. The way, if I read the question, I would personally think most users would think they would pick the highest validator in terms of, most people delegate to them, they have a high self-stake value, and just pick the first one of the first 10 on the list ranked by total balance they have. The way I would look at it is more, if you are a validator and you own 100 tokens, if you only have 10% of them staked, you don't really have all the skin in the game. So I would say probably half of people who selected, preference for high stake value, maybe they thought one way or the other, or even less people thought it's important for them to have a skin in the game. But it's definitely something we can dig into a bit more, maybe like another questionnaire or something to really dig deeper into that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's interesting to distinguish if it's either the validators, like are they fully using the capital that they have? Are they being efficient with it? Or are there other factors as well? All right, so moving on, journeying towards non-custodial staking. So these set of questions focus on understanding, one, what type of method are users using to stake? and delegate their tokens either through like non-custodial routes or through custodial routes. And then we ask them their opinions on decentralization. So what really interesting correlation that we noticed from this is the more decentralized approach a user takes to staking, the higher their opinion is of decentralization and the importance of decentralization. Whereas users that are staking through custodial providers actually value decentralization the least, and not only relative to people staking, but also relative to people that aren't even staking or considering staking. So super interesting to see that data point sort of speak the obvious, but to see that they care less about decentralization even more than people that are not staking, I thought was really interesting to point out.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it just backs up what our assumptions already were. I mean, I am fairly surprised that people running their own nodes or people staking directly through smart contracts or on-chain would actually recommend staking to a friend. It's a rabbit hole to go down into. Usually when any of my friends that are not that into crypto keep asking about it, staking is the last thing that I mentioned to them. Firstly, figure out what you're doing, figure out the tokens. I wouldn't straight away be like, all right, you have dollars, buy tokens and stake them. Just ease them into it a bit. But I guess people who are running their own nodes, their friend circle mostly revolves around people that are already into crypto. So then again, maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're probably really invested in the process as well, since they go through all the trouble of setting up their nodes and so on. So it's probably something they really believe in.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so digging a little deeper on the journey towards non-custodial staking, we ask users their opinions of non-custodial staking. So only 13% of users actually don't see the benefits of non-custodial staking. So even though in the previous question we showed behavior that not necessarily everyone is doing non-custodial staking, majority of people actually do believe that there's significant benefits to non-custodial staking. And the people that said that, outside of the ones that the 13% that didn't see the benefits, the other reasons why people are not doing non-custodial staking is because, one, they don't know how to, so they need education. They need some sort of assurance to make sure that they feel safe doing so. And then lastly, making the experience a lot easier. And I think further to that, if we look at people that mentioned that they do stake, but are on custodial provider services rather than non-custodial provider services, their number one reason why they do that is because it just takes too much work to actually do non-custodial staking yourself. So I think these are really interesting pain points that users are pointing out about the staking process.
Yeah, certainly. I'm also curious to see how these numbers changed over the last week, right? So
yeah,
we might have to redo a slide in a couple of months and see, are people still, are more people actually reading about staking and how to get onto the, using their own wallets and everything. Because obviously, it is easier to do everything on centralized exchanges. You pay a bit of commission, but I don't think anyone really expects to pay 100% commission at the end of the day when things, go south. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of projects going on at the moment that are trying to improve the UX. It's worthwhile to go back and listen to a few of the discussions we had, a few panels we had at the staking summit, especially the first one of the day on how to grow staking to 1 billion users. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things going on. There's definitely a lot of advancements being made. So looking forward to the next bull run, 2024 probably.
Yeah, if we're lucky. I think, I totally agree with you. And I think one other aspect of it, which users seem to be portraying through this, is like the way that information is communicated to users and the way that it's presented to users to help them really understand benefits, the process, how to go about it, also seems something that users really want in non-custodial staking. Okay, so moving on, we'll talk about liquid staking and MEV. So with liquid staking, there are some interesting discrepancies between users and validators. So we have about 81% of users are actually liquid staking right now. About half of those users are only staking between more than 0.1% to 25%, which is, again, for a new staking solution, it's a great start for the year. And then if we look at their sentiment towards liquid staking, which is really interesting, is 40% only think that liquid staking is positive for the ecosystem, whereas validators, they're not all of them are offering staking opportunities as much. So only 62% of validators are offering liquid staking, but they have a significantly higher sentiment of 71% relative to users. So what do you make of this, Alan, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think users follow Twitter. If there's things going on Twitter, the sentiment of the users will change drastically. After the merge, when everyone started looking into it and going on rated network and seeing like, oh, Lido owns 30% of the network, the sentiment shifted completely. So from a user perspective, they kind of look at the first layer, most users. Whereas I guess from a validator perspective, they can dig deeper and see actually 30% by Lido is actually it's being diversified between 28 different validators. So that's a kind of first negative sentiment where people who are deeper into it might not feel the same as users who just kind of see what's going on Twitter. But from a user perspective, again, they might want to be involved. People might want to just put some money into a project protocol. It's hopefully safe enough for them to hold it for a year, and at the end of it, who knows, maybe it's going to be an airdrop, maybe they get something out of it on top of the rewards. People always do airdrop farming every day. But yeah, in terms of the validators not being involved in liquid staking as much, I think it's probably also what's the best solution for validators? Is it, are the solutions out there now actually worthwhile for all the validators and providers to get into? Are they waiting for something different? Are they actually working on their own solutions as well? There's probably quite a few providers trying to find, what is the most optimal thing for them, either building it themselves or working with someone who's going to be launching it at some point in the near future. So from their perspective, why would you get involved now in a protocol you don't believe in if there's something new coming out? So once you're positive and once your sentiment in liquid staking is positive, you might just want to delay your entry to it.
Yeah, very true. And you're probably making a lot more significant decisions as a validator that are probably more permanent and longer term than a user, because a user can more easily get out of liquid staking, whereas validators have to build an entire process around it. So agreed with you, despite there might be positive, the amount of work and decisions that need to be made prior to actually doing that is a lot more significant. And also one interesting fact, at least from this data that we have, only 19% of crypto users that do stake don't actually liquid stake. So majority of users are actually liquid staking to some degree. But really interesting data on this one.
Yeah, I mean, for certainly there's a lot of people from the Cardano community who answer this questionnaire, and they're quite, they're quite loud about the fact that Cardano offers only liquid staking, right? So I'm pretty sure majority of the people who answered this are part of that community. So I would say if we subtract those, maybe we'd see this numbers shift as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, moving on to MEV participation. So from the data that we asked, primarily validators, so 40% of validator providers participate in MEV, and the majority of them actually earn less than 10% of revenues from MEV. And something positive for delegators, at least for now, about 92% of the validators share between 70% to 100% of all MEV revenue with them. So I guess the big question on this one is, we talk about MEV, something that's really important in the space, especially around the conversation of centralization versus decentralization. What are your thoughts on this? Because this is probably going to be one of the most developing events in the space in the next year or two.
I mean, I do think MEV as a topic will die down quite soon. I mean, it was around a year or two ago. It's going to be around for the next few years as well, but it's just gotten, it's just being discussed now because of the merge. Most people just didn't even know about it. And I do think that the MEV will go up in terms of its share, how much validators are making. But there's discussions going around now with different protocols actually having protection from MEV. MEV on the protocol layer as well, so the protocol actually gets the MEV revenue instead of the validators. So I think not only are we going to see a shift in these numbers and how much you can make from it, but also about who gets them. So maybe validators are not going to make anything from MEV, but MEV is going to contribute to 20% of what the users make. Maybe it's going to be sort of every time you do a trade, if the protocol makes MEV from it, you get an instant rebate as well. So yeah, I do think it's going to be a big topic, not in terms of users looking into it in depth, but definitely something to follow. Definitely something that there's going to be a lot of innovations from all different types of angles. Yeah, but I am quite surprised with the 40% of validators participating. Likely that's not all layer ones offer MEV. Yep. There's no easy way to get it. A lot of the validators or providers we spoke to and questioned here, validate on the Cosmos chain, and there's not really any solutions at the moment for MEV there. There's a few in the production. I mean, again, we had Barry from Skip at the staking summit. I would definitely urge everyone to watch the keynote he gave and see what direction Cosmos is going in. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff moving, and looking forward to it over the next 2 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the ETH merge, like you mentioned, MEV has been a hot topic, and it will die down. But I think at the same time, we'll see it spurring up in the next year or two as we move towards the future of ETH.
Yeah, discussions will go down, but innovation will not, in my opinion.
Interesting. Speaking of innovation, again, this is probably revolving around centralization versus decentralization. At the end of this is like validator infrastructure. So majority of validators today are actually evenly distributed between physical and cloud servers, and most anticipate physical hosting will outpace cloud hosting in the long term. So a few questions on this one. One, you're thinking about how does this affect a delegator's perspective when they're looking at a validator? Do they really care if a validator is either physical or cloud hosted? And then if you're thinking about it from the validator perspective, you're thinking about it from a business operations perspective, because one of these options could potentially be cheaper for you, either short-term or long-term. So how do you make that decision? And interesting to see that validators long-term believe that physical hosting will outpace cloud hosting, and that might be towards like the ethos of decentralization within crypto. But curious your thoughts on this, Alan.
Yeah, I think we've seen recently with Hetzner, a lot of 20% of the whole Solana network basically went down. That's in my opinion the biggest risk. As a provider, you have higher costs running it yourself. Maintenance, you have to be more alert. You have to build all of the systems around it, like all the monitoring yourself. Whereas with, if you go for a cloud server with AWS, Google Cloud, Tencent, whoever, most of the tools are there for you. So you only really have to worry about the staking operation rather than the server operation. From a delegator's perspective, if you're delegating to a provider who relies on cloud services, you can also, most of the time, it's more reliable. You have, if they're running on like AWS, Contabo, Tencent, Google, like they're huge teams that have experience running servers, like even bigger servers than we need for crypto at the moment, without many issues. So they are reliable from an operation side of things. But the risk comes with any kind of regulation, them being scared of what's going to happen, which I think now with Google Cloud entering the Solana ecosystem, Tencent trying to make a break into crypto as well, I think that kind of risk is only really present for like some of these cloud service providers. It would be very strange if you're hosting something in Google Cloud and they shut down all Solana validators if they're actually one of them. So I think that's kind of that part of a risk that you had before Hesna went down and the week after Hesna went down. You're kind of seeing this kind of slow shift where the people who are really against it are completely against it, and the people who are pro will actually do it themselves and will announce to everyone, like, we are fine with you doing this. So we'll see a lot of, in my opinion, we'll see a lot of people shifting towards those providers, which will reduce the risk for delegators, in my opinion. Obviously, you can't be more decentralized than running your own physical servers, but it is a risk. Yeah, it is a risk. Obviously, with innovations like DVT, we'll also see changes there. It'll be interesting to see in a year's time how this looks, how much of the network is being run on DVTs. Yeah, there's not much more from my side, to be honest. I'm just curious how these numbers will change.
Yeah, definitely. And considering, like, especially what happens with crypto in the next couple of quarters, then the whole situation going on right now with like FTX and Alameda, it'll be interesting to see validator decisions moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we'll cover commission rates. So 45% of validators believe that commission rates are too high, and that is for custodial, their opinion on custodial validators, versus the half of validators believe that the commission fees are going to trend downwards in the future towards TradeFi fees. And then half of users believe that the commission fees that they're paying for staking, regardless of the type of validator that they're staking with, they believe that generally those commission rates are fair. What are your thoughts on commission rates and about this data?
Yeah, I mean, this is a super interesting topic for me. I was on the panel recently at the Staking Summit on validator pricing strategies. We went a bit in depth on how it works. One of the most interesting things, one of the most transparent things that was discussed is actually that institutions do deals behind closed doors on getting smaller commission rates with these providers, which makes sense. It happens in traditional finance. It happens everywhere. Every market you look at, there's deals being done. What I did like, though, is that they mentioned that on stage, at the Staking Summit in front of 500 people. Like, they were open about it, which you don't really get anywhere else. So yeah, whilst the fees is like, so going back to the actual commission rates, like, I do think the fees are quite high. It makes sense for them to be high now, but I think as the market will mature, people will start realizing, like, okay, what is it I'm paying for? They will start looking at the big providers, like Coinbase, for example, charging 20%, and the number one on Cosmos at the moment. They'll start shifting. Like, not only are you paying too much potentially, maybe you're paying too little, right? That's not the story. That's not the question for me. It's how much revenue are these providers making, and is that justifiable? Maybe you'd rather delegate to one of the smaller providers who charges 40% than delegating to the top ones charging 20, just to kind of shift this kind of, go away from proof of marketing to proof of staking, where people who make the most money can have the best marketing and dominate the market. We need to have a shift where people start delegating to those making less, regardless of the commission rate they charge.
Totally. And I think it'll be interesting, and maybe we can do this data on the full ecosystem report, this analysis, where we also look at validator decisions around how their infrastructure is being built through physical versus cloud. And a bunch of other decisions that they're making, because maybe some validators in the future of providers will be providing additional benefits versus competition, so that might justify better rates for them or higher rates. So irrespective of just looking at rates, looking at the other decisions that validators are making, it'll be interesting to see how, if delegators will be willing to pay like a premium for particular features or more decentralization and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, as we saw on the first slide, right? 40% of people say the most important thing in selecting a validator is the features for them. So I do think there's a lot of work the smaller providers can do, like hosting events, creating communities in their own countries to make them stand out. Cosmos Station with MintScan, for example, like those are features that you are paying for by paying the commission to them, but you're actually getting a lot more in return, like things you can't do yourself and things that other people wouldn't want to do.
Yep, fair. And then it becomes a lot about, it's not about just a price competitive market. It becomes a lot about the value add that these validators are providing to users. And then, so we have 2 more slides, and we're talking about the industry outlook. So we asked all the validators what they think are the most interesting aspects of innovation happening in the validator space. So we broke that down into 4. One is decentralization enablers. So these are any sort of new technologies or processes that are nurturing a more decentralized validator experience. So essentially, their main focus in terms of the outlook is thinking about how do they become more decentralized in their operations and the industry in general. And then we talked about economic innovation. So that's around the tokenomics of how projects are innovating, scaling capabilities and security improvements. Those ones are pretty straightforward. But I think, again, decentralization is, one of the most important and biggest themes in crypto. And I think it's no surprise that validators are also most interested in looking at innovations to further decentralization. Any thoughts on this one, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite surprised that we didn't have any comments from the providers saying, actually tooling is the most important thing. Like over the last few days, with Breakpoint and Summit, that was the most requested thing. Like everyone says, we need better tooling, we need better monitoring, we need alerts when things are going down, which is something that everyone's working on at the moment. Something that we might see more happening from our side in the next year or so. But yeah, no, definitely decentralization enablers. There was Sebastian from HopperNet at the summit doing a breakout session on introducing privacy for validators, so you can hide your IP, you can hide your location, but still validate a network and how that would work. And there was a lot of people present at the breakout session. I think that was the main one. People really interested in like how would this work and like what are the benefits, and like what do we risk when we do this? Like, is a potential for Sybil attacks with decentralization enablers or not? How do you get around that? And is it kind of a short-term loss for long-term gain? And how do we calculate the risks of it? Like now, like if someone comes up with a solution now, tomorrow, how do we know that someone's just not going to launch 175 validators in Cosmos and pretend to be different people? So whilst interesting innovations, I do hope that they don't come too soon, but they come out in a very streamlined fashion and everything is well thought through, and there's ways to get around it from the protocol level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your sentiment, it's interesting looking at what we ask the same questions to users, and from their perspective, it aligns more to what you're talking about now, which is users. So we ask them, what do they want from validators looking out into the future? So top 3 features requested is data analytics. So essentially anything that provides more information about the current portfolio or what's happening in terms of the particular protocols through like on-chain data, really trying to understand that and making it easier for users to see all that information in maybe one simplified spot is something that a lot of users are requesting. And then liquid staking, as I think as we also saw that earlier in the data, that's something that users are using it, but their sentiment is somewhat split. And then lastly, and I think also very necessary aspect of the future of staking is just ease of use for users. And these are the three top recommended requested solutions. This was data that was like long text responses from 1,500 users. So we had to summarize this data into a variety of categories. And in the actual full report, we'll go deeper into some of the requests that users are making. But this is the last data point we have today. So any thoughts on this one, Alan?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised at how varied the answers are, right? I mean, this is like, in my opinion, a sign of like the maturing market. It's not just, data nerds going in and being like, oh, we want better analytics, and like 99% of people want that. It's like actually spread out, people wanting different types of solutions, like validator screening, it's the third from the right. It's, we have people who care about this. We care people about, having liquid tokens, people who care about it being easy. So yeah, I think it's quite a good moment for staking right now, where you have all of these different types of users that want different things. It's difficult, right? Like if it was, if everyone wanted the same thing, we could produce it in a few months. But everyone, everyone's different. Everyone's different. Everyone wants to look at it from a different perspective, and I think ultimately that's what's taking staking to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think users, as they're using it more, and crypto becomes more popular amongst users, we'll see more and more variety over time. But I mean, that was just a sneak peek of the data that we have with this particular survey that we did this year. So we're working on the full report right now, and we should have that out for everyone to see hopefully next month.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And the full report is going to be available on our website. You can also sign up for the newsletter to be notified as soon as it's live. Anyone who took the questionnaire, the surveys, you'll get a free copy before the full release. So yeah, and also, you can follow Elton and myself on Twitter. We've got a Staking Intern Twitter account where we're posting any more insights, any more small, if there's anything degen related that we can't put into the full report, but the Staking Intern is going to be there for you to follow. And yeah, any questions, any comments on what you've seen today, just let us know, put it in the comments. We'll make sure to put as much as possible into the final report. And yeah, anything we left out, anyone we left out, if you still want to submit anything, let us know. We can still adjust numbers here and there. All right, perfect, Elton. It was a pleasure to speak to you. And yeah, thanks everyone, and happy staking.